Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. If you've been listening to my little mini saga about my podcast location, you can see I'm still in a weird kind of not quite finished space. If you've heard me talking about it, you know that I was living with my mother for a little while, which breeds challenges and all in itself. Although I love her to death. She is wonderful. But some fun life update. Finally found a house that we liked. We've purchased it and we've been doing lots and lots of renovations and purchasing of things, which is super duper fun, super exciting, and also super stressful. So I have been making decisions on colors, on floorboards. Do I buy this? Do I just deal with it and work on it later? And so all kinds of fun or not fun decisions. And it got me thinking about back when I was a leader in automotive manufacturing, my controller at the time used to say to me, he's like, you literally make hundreds of decisions a day. He's like, that's kind of nuts. And some controller personalities, I think they're a little bit more controlled in their decision-making than maybe some other leaders. So it was something that I started to think about. And it is often a question that I get through my leadership programs. How do I make good decisions? How do I do this? And then when I work with leaders, how do I figure out what I'm doing? Where should I go next? How do I do this? So ultimately, as a leader, you're making decisions, big and giant, all the time. So I want to talk today about how we make decisions, how we can best be prepared to make decisions, and how we do it when we're under stress, under pressure, or kind of under the gun, as they say. So let's get into it. The biggest thing that is going to help you with decision making is preparation. And I've talked about this before, but I'm going to say it again because it is super duper important. The greater clarity that you have on these specific things, the easier all decisions are going to be. So if there was ever any push or selling point to do strategy work, this is it. Because decisions, not just for you, but also for your team, are going to become tremendously simpler because you've already discussed all the nuances that go around it. And if you haven't, or if you think you have, and you're still struggling with every single decision, then you need to go back and re-clarify. Because when you do this right, when you truly understand your company values, when you truly understand what your company does, and you've agreed to it, you've hashed out all these possibilities, and you said, this is what we do, and this is how we help people, or this is how we help our customers, this is what we sell. When we figure this out, all these other decisions become simpler because you've decided. And it's not to say that you can't change your mind. It's not to say you can't add a new product. But if you say, well, we help people by educating them, or we help people by selling them automotive products, and then you want to go maybe, sell a beauty product, like maybe you kind of say, well, maybe that doesn't fit in this. And maybe I'm jumping onto some bandwagon that doesn't need to be because that's not what we do. Maybe I've got an input that can help someone else, but that's not what we do. It just makes that decision simpler because not everything is new. So this is the first thing that you need to be extremely, extremely clear, not just within yourself, but you and your management team need to be clear on these things. The first one, every single leader needs to be very clear on their own personal values. So first and foremost, like every team player, every person that comes in needs to get clear on that. It needs to continue to refine this because this is something that is going to help you buy in or stand up for things that either work for you or don't work for you. So being very clear on that can help make that decision. Do I leave this company or not? A heck of a lot easier too. So that is the first one. So always, always, always personal values first. Then next, company values. I want you to be extremely clear on what the values of your organization are. And this is those real values, not the pretend ones. So I've explained the four different types of values. So the first ones are aspirational values. So we really want to do this. We're not great at it. Like we want to be the best problem solvers and use data-based decisions and that kind of thing. And it's like, well, you don't do it today. You want to do it, but if you don't do it today, it's not a core value. If you want to do it, you can call it an aspirational value, set goals, figure out how you're going to get there, hire the people that have those personal values already. That will help you get there better, but it's not a core value. And to make a decision based on that core value is going to be different than if it's an aspirational value. So not that, it's not the pay to play sort of values. So it's like, well, duh, we treat people with respect. Of course we do. Yes, we're honest in our communication. Of course we are. But are you honest to the point that that trumps everything? So I am going to tell you exactly what's wrong with your, I don't know, however you want to say honesty is a core value, but that means that it trumps everything and that you will forego clients for this honesty. You will forego supplier base based on this. I don't know. Like, of course we all want to be honest, but I'm just saying that there is a difference when it is like, it trumps everything no matter what. Like you're not even going to like say, oh, your hair looks great, even when it doesn't, like that kind of level of honesty. That is a pay to play. Like, of course, we're honest. We're going to be honest in our dealings. We're going to be on the up and up. We're going to be straightforward, straight shooting. Fourth one, the third one is the accidental values. And these are ones you may not even see that you're doing. I tend to see this with a lot of companies a lot of leaders will hire a lot of people like them. So sometimes it's a good thing because you need people who agree with your general value system, but they'll hire healthy, fit, young parents, that kind of thing. And so it's like that becomes a value without intending to be a value. And that can get in the way because when we talk cross-functional teams and having a level of diversity for decision-making, that can get in the way because everybody's on the same wavelength. You're not seeing what maybe an empty nester sees, and you're not seeing what a single person with no children kind of might see versus where somebody who's struggled to get where they are and somebody who's had, been college educated and had a lot just kind of come to them easily. Like, so you're not going to get all those perspectives unless you make sure you stay away from these accidental sort of values. And then finally, the core values. These are the very defining ones. So truly defining and understanding these about your company. We are problem solvers. We see a problem, we jump on it, we get it solved, and we move forward with the solution. We're solution creators, like that kind of a thing. And you truly are. You truly embody that. And when somebody doesn't, they're not going to survive in your company. Like that's what that means. So that's what we really need to understand because you're going to be faced with decisions that are going to challenge that a little bit. You'll likely have, especially in high stress situations, you'll likely have a scenario that might seem like a good idea because of X, Y, and Z, but doesn't align. And so there's a lot of decision making that people might say, oh, I go with my gut. And a lot of it is, especially so I have discernment. So I seem to trust my gut sometimes better than my analyzing because it seems to work better for me. In all reality, you need more than your gut. Your gut is great. And your gut is I think hiring is a lot of gut, but really what your gut is it's these signals and triggers and patterns that you don't recognize, but you feel like there's something wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. I was going to say your foot. Can't put your finger on it. And it's like, oh, it just all logic says to me, this is good, but there's something that isn't. And it's stopping me from pulling the trigger. That's your gut talking. And there probably is something there. So figuring out how to kind of peel back the onion on that gut is great. And also knowing when you're going with your gut and you need to go with your gut versus you can't go with your gut. So a lot about gut. So ultimately, if we always just make everything I used to hear horror stories of a past boss who liked to go around saying, hey, I'm just always shooting from the hip, So if you have no planning in there, then you're going to start spinning in circles, right? You will stay still. You won't move forward and you won't go forward. So not every decision can be gut based, but there is a lot there. So I don't want to minimize gut feels. because I love it, but you can't fly by the seat of your pants and everything, or shoot from the hip, as they like to say, and that will get you lost very easily. You want to be very clear on personal values for yourself, company values, and also company direction. And so that encompasses a few different things. Overall, understanding the base purpose of why a company exists and what that means to the people that are running it, that can help clarify decisions. So truly understanding that you don't maybe exist, like you probably don't exist just to deliver car parts to somebody, like especially in smaller companies, maybe large corporations, maybe there was a need, there's usually something deeper behind why the business is there. Getting very clear on that is huge. And again, can help steer away from chasing trends or chasing the shiny object, but it can also bring clarity to maybe why it looks as though you're chasing a shiny object when reality still holds true to the core value or the core purpose of why that organization exists. This is an example from a book. So I don't know this person personally, but there's a company, they were a cement company, and they originally were created to give new Americans a place to work. So new immigrants, hey, I can put you to work. You don't necessarily have to speak English well. I can get you working. And, we'll help you learn English, and we'll help you do this, and we'll help you do that. So decisions that they're making around that make sense. And the reality is that if they could do that same purpose by building houses, they would do that. Or by running a hardware store, they would do that. Like they would do any kind of work that would enable them to bring people in, help take care of them, teach them English, and then help them, get their families, whatever it is, get their family settled and, get rolling in the country. So that would be potentially a good reason why it might look like a business owner might be a bit flighty, because they've got this, this, and this, but their main purpose is helping new Americans or helping single moms, get work and be flexible for their kids. Like maybe that's the purpose. So it's important to understand that, as well as something we call strategic anchors. So these are the things that essentially your company, they're differentiators essentially, but they're decision points and they're clarity points. They're essentially how your company is going to succeed or how your organization will succeed. So some examples of those would be that your community is supporting. So if some local, support local, that's a strategic anchor because you partner with local businesses, you want to serve local community businesses, and you live in the community. So that's kind of how that all gets encompassed. But you also want to support, you want to sponsor teams and that sort of thing. So when a local company comes in and says, or a local organization says, hey, can you sponsor our local charity that supports this local organization? You can more easily say, yes, that makes sense for us. Whereas if maybe a nationwide company comes in and wants you to support that, you might say, I've actually funneled all my money over here and I can't do that right now because it doesn't meet the strategic anchor. So it takes some of that thinking out of it, because that's really what's hard about decisions. Decisions aren't hard. It's just all the details that have to do with the decision. When I make this decision, it only impacts the next choice. We don't live in a world like that. I make this decision and it affects here, 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 and it spirals off and spider webs out to thousands of other things. So very tiny little tweak or change in that decision can have huge impact. And that's why they feel stressful. So when you've already taken out some of the decisions, what you've essentially done is you've eliminated, like when you've pre-made these decisions, you've essentially eliminated a whole lot of other decisions and almost made a process of it, right? And when we have a process to follow, life is simpler. This is actually how our brains work. Our brains go on autopilot. I talk about this a lot because we talk a lot about change. Our brains are on autopilot most of the time. So it needs to do that. Otherwise, we couldn't function because our brain just couldn't make all those kinds of active decisions all the time. It needs to put it into the subconscious because it takes less energy. So we only want to bring forward like the special cases. So you've probably heard me talk about, you've heard of the 80-20 rule, Pareto principle. you only want to consider 20% or less, maybe. Generally speaking, you want to consider 20%. The rest of the 80% should just go. So when you have clarity around, again, your personal values, your company values, why your company exists, and these strategic anchors, these things that make your company, that just takes so much of the thought, the discussion, the stress around it, the back and forth. It takes so much of that out that it makes decision making, whether it's for, a stressful, like the world's on fire kind of decision, or a long-term, where do we take this company decision? And to add to that, just one extra little thought process for those long-term types of decisions. The other thing, as well as with personal values that you need to understand and have clarity around, you also want to understand how your business supports these personal values, supports this life that you want. So when you can think through that and you can say, how, does my business at its current state, with the time and effort I'm putting into it today, is that how I want to be? Does that support the lifestyle that I want or I feel called to have? Maybe you're called to do have a nonprofit, but this business is your way to support that nonprofit. Okay, well, you've got to do something different than just run your business if that's what you're called to do. Or you want to be able to retire at 60 and travel. And if you're still working in your business full time, you can't do that. So you have to figure out, how do I support it? How do I grow it to a point that I can have a successor, or that I can be just the board member that comes in every now and again instead of the always have to run it all the time? Or how do I build it up so I can sell it and do that? So a lot of considerations have to come in. And again, gaining clarity around that can help tremendously with decisions and big long-term company decisions as well. So what I remember, a lot of my decisions and some of the hardest decisions that I had to make as a leader were these, the world is on fire, we have to make a decision. And having the clarity behind me of all this preparation was wonderful. But sometimes it doesn't feel like it matters, right? You have a decision, and the worst decisions were when it felt like there was no right decision. So maybe to some that feels safer because, no decision is a good decision. I just have to pick the most good or the least bad decision. But that is sometimes a real life place where you're at. While that sucks, it helps to have a little bit of preparation or some thoughts that you can run through your head as a quick gut checker, in a way, like a gut verifier, to say, yes, this makes sense. Or you can even use them to help coach your team so that they can better make decisions that are more aligned with how you will, or just more aligned with company values, or more aligned with, in general, just better decision making. So here's some thoughts that you can work through, and some mindsets and some questions you can ask yourself. Essentially, when you have no right decision to make, they all feel wrong. It's just, bad or worse kind of decisions. The biggest thing you have to think about is the consequences, because ultimately that's what matters. And what's the impact of that? So, understanding, okay, if I do this, then this will happen, or this is likely to happen. That's really the balance. It's how do we measure the consequences off? So a great question to ask yourself is, what's the worst thing that could happen if I do this, or I don't do this, or I choose this one, not that one, whatever it might be. A lot of my decisions were, do you shut down for 8 hours and fix the machine appropriately, or do you Band-Aid it and limp along for a little bit until you get past the order, and then you take it down for 8 hours? So it's a lot of that kind of decision making. So you do what you need to do. But thinking through those consequences, what's the worst thing that could happen? And secondary question to that, is there anything I can do to mitigate it? So, sometimes the mitigating was the limp along, that kind of thing. But considering the worst case scenario of what could happen, just two things for you. First of all, it helps you consider all the worst possibilities and figuring out how you can mitigate those. But secondly, it helps you kind of say, well, the worst thing that could happen is people are going to look at me funny, or we have to, change our mind and do it the other way. That there's really no impact to it. So I use this one a lot for long-term decision making. So it's sometimes the worst thing that could happen if you start to research something is literally nothing. You spent the time researching, you lost the time. Or sometimes the worst thing that could happen is people are a little bit upset Okay, how do I mitigate that? I talk to them about it. I explain the situation. Like that's, sometimes the reality, it's not that big. And sometimes the worst thing that could happen is you could shut down Ford and you'll be charged $1 million an hour. That might be pretty big. So there's a lot of things that you say, okay, well, what's the worst thing? The other side of it, what's the best thing that could happen? So if I do this or don't do this, what's the best thing that could happen? And kind of weighing out the likelihood of both is a really helpful situation or a helpful way to do that. And then again, how can I, like with that, what's the best thing? How can I make sure that's what happens, right? So what else can you do to make sure that the best thing happens, or at least closer to the best thing happens? So those are great questions to help you consider the consequences, because of course, when you're stressed, your brain doesn't work as well as you want it to. It's not working the same. You've got adrenaline going in places and cortisone going in places, and, tigers being chased around. If you've taken anything about stress with me, you get that joke. But essentially, your brain is not working where it should be because it's in survival mode. It's in fear and protection mode, and you're not always going to think as clearly. So if you can ask yourself these sorts of questions, you can start to understand that, the consequences aren't as bad as I thought they were, or yeah, they're bad, but it's very unlikely they're going to get that bad. We can do these things to ensure they're less bad. And, we're going to do this thing. So the decision gets a little bit more objective because you've gotten yourself out of the crazy stress that they call it the upstairs brain, puts you into. So hint on mitigation. A lot of communication can help mitigate a lot of consequences. Because if people are stressed about stuff, people will get more stressed when they don't know anything, when they're wondering what's going to happen, and they're pontificating a lot of potential scenarios and things that may or may not even be possible, right? So the more you can communicate, even if you know nothing, you can say, hey, nothing has changed since the last time we talked, but I wanted to check in and let you know that this is what we're doing. And this is what's happening. We'll keep you updated. And that constant just touch point can mitigate a lot of bad consequences, because perception has a lot to do with a lot of things. And the more that you let people think about bad stuff happening, the wilder and crazier they can get, the more angry they can get over nothing, or even, worst case, they're prepping for you to be there or do something and you're not. So you're going to make them angry, right? So there might be like legit anger there. So the more you can communicate, the better. So ultimately, a lot of decision-making comes in around a mindset. So being able to understand that the impact of this thing is this big or, huge, or maybe it's not as bad as I thought it did, or I thought it was. And keeping that clear in your own head to de-stress the situation is very helpful to keeping things in perspective, keeping your thinking brain more active, and being able to make these better decisions. If you found the episode helpful today, please like it, share it with a friend, share it with somebody who has been saying, oh my gosh, I feel like I have to make 1,000 decisions a day. And what do I do? How do I do it? Send them this episode and they will thank you. And leave a like, leave a review on the YouTube channel, leave a comment, and I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.